Hello, my name is Jill Bourne and welcome to the TX series of recordings and lectures that support the Open Tuition Manual. Just to let you know, I've been teaching tax for over 20 years, so I hope you feel confident in my hands and that I can guide you through this manual and towards your exams and success for yourselves. Now the manual's been prepared using the Finance Act 22. Done my utmost to find every error, proofread it so many times, but please, if you find one, just post it on the Ask the Tutor site so that we can make an amendment for you. It will help you if you have the manual with you while you are watching the lectures. Follow them in a logical order, the order in which they are on the contents page. It will help as you move along so that you can see what I'm doing, so the explanations make sense. You can see how the answers are created, so that you can then use that information in your own self-studies. You will also need a BPP revision kit, which has all the exam style questions in it. So you work your way through the manual and the recordings and take in the knowledge. Once you've got it in, you practice with the revision kit to get yourselves ready for the exams. Okay, let's have a quick look at the contents because there's some important information in here. You'll notice that I've marked up the TX UK syllabus and the tax rates and allowances. I'm going to go through that just as an introductory for you. It's important, there's some information in there. Then there are some self-study chapters that you won't find recordings and lectures for. So the first one is the UK tax system. That chapter you'll find appears mostly in the multiple choice questions. The other ones are, let's have a look down here. We've got national insurance contributions. That's a self-study one. The self-assessment and the payment of tax for individuals. That's also a self-study one. There you will learn who pays what checks and balances are in place, what the penalties, interests, all of those sort of things are. Also, you've got the self-assess. These two are the very much the same kind of questions, situations. Self-assessment, payment of tax for companies. So when they have to pay it, when they have to submit their tax returns, what happens if they don't, what the revenue responsibilities are, those sort of things you'll find in there. And the final one there is the tax planning style questions. Read that self-study when you've done the whole manual. It's there at the end to help you with your exams. So they've also got at the end here the answers to the examples, which we'll go through. Each chapter has some little questions and the answers will be at the back, though I will go through them each one individually. And then at the end, these are your next step. So you go through the manual, you watch all the lectures, then you do the practice questions and answers. And when you've done those, then you move on to your BPP revision kit. Okay, so let's go to the next section. This is the syllabus. It's the Finance Act 22 for exams from June 23 for a 12-month period. So that's June 23, September 23, December 23 and March 24. If you are sitting an exam in any of those periods of time, this is the Finance Act that you need to be using, because tax changes every year. Always has done, always will do. And if you use the wrong Finance Act in your course, in your taking in knowledge in your learning, if you use the wrong Finance Act, then you'll find the figures are different and therefore the questions might not make sense and neither will the answers. Okay, so the idea of this course is to develop your knowledge and skills relating to, and I'll put in there, the UK tax system for individuals, companies and groups of companies. Okay, so the objectives of the course We want you to pass your exam. Okay, we want you to pass it first time if possible. You need to get more than 50%, don't forget. Therefore, you should be able to explain the operation and scope of the tax system, obligation of taxpayers and their agents, and implications of non-compliance. Non-compliance means you're not doing as you're told. Now, those basically, you'll find most of that in the admin chapters that I mentioned earlier, the self-study ones. And the questions about the tax system, tax evasion, tax avoidance, kind of tax it is, when you've got to pay, why you've got to pay, when you've got to send forms in, and what happens if you don't. That's in the admin chapters, and that normally turns up in, it might turn up in a section C question, but only as a few marks at the bottom, normally multiple choice questions. You've got to explain, compute income tax liabilities, that's the first tax there. Individuals, the effect of national insurance contributions. Okay, that's your second one. And again, that's a self-study question. Chapter, don't forget. For employees, employers, self-employed, because it's all slightly different. But most of the NIC information that you come across is in the tables, which we'll come to later. Explain and compute. Compute means to work out. Corporation tax liabilities for individual companies and groups. That's your third tax. Chargeable gains for companies and individuals. Some of the rules are very similar. Some of them are slightly different. And we'll go through each chapter. As I say, that's why it's important that you go through the chapters in the order in which they are in the manual. Because if you start moving around and doing them in different orders, then information that's earlier in the manuals may affect the way that later chapters are dealt with. Okay. Inheritance tax. I know you're not supposed to have a favourite tax, but that's my favourite tax. So explain. Now, in this exam, you will have to write words. Okay, you will have to do some writing and explain. Compute, that's your numbers. And then your final tax is VAT. Okay, so 5 main areas: income tax, corporation tax, chargeable gain tax, inheritance tax, VAT. Okay, so those are your 5 main taxes. All right. So this in the overall syllabus. Okay. So this is about simply about tax. Okay. And it mentions there that it provides the core knowledge of the underlying principles, major technical areas of tax as they affect individuals and businesses. Okay, so I will introduce you to why we have these taxes and how it all works. Okay, so that's the rationale behind and the functions. Each tax an accountant needs to know. Okay, detailed knowledge of income tax. It mentions there again these taxes: income tax for the self-employed and individuals, and investments, things like bank accounts, building societies, income that you've invested in shares so you get dividends, those sort of things. Corporation tax, national insurance, again VAT, you've got them all, chargeable gains and inheritance tax. Okay. This is the core knowledge you're going to learn. Tax is quite a complicated topic, I have to admit. But what we're going to do is try and keep it nice and straightforward and nice and simple so that you have enough information to be able to pass your exams. Okay. Now, what you learn in an exam is different from real life for tax. But we need just to get you through the exam. Okay. And accountants, they have to have a knowledge to do their job, but at the end of the day, the client, to be honest, they're interested in how much tax they've got to pay, not how you got to that point. But accountants need to know how to get to that point. So let's look at the syllabus in a little bit more detail, just to give you an overview of what you're going to have to learn. Okay, so the admin, all of this admin, as I mentioned, purpose of tax, function of tax, sources of law, okay, self-assessment. So those two there are in the first chapter, which, let me get my thing said, the UK tax system. That's where you'll find those. The rest of these, self-assessment, when you've got to send your, what the dates are, when you've got to send your returns in, time limits for submitting information, claims, payments, all of those things, they're in your admin section. So this is in the UK tax system chapter, and this is in the admin chapters. And you can see there a bit more detail of what you need to be able to do. So read through those chapters. They can be done in isolation, and it might be worth spending some time reading through them first, particularly the first chapter, and then the admin ones after you've done. So the admin for individuals, do that after you've done the income tax section, and the admin for companies, read that again once you've done the corporation tax chapters. So when it comes to income tax, we are going to look at the scope of income tax, who is covered by it, income from employment. Okay, so that's you have a job, you receive a salary, how is that taxed, what can you claim, when is it paid, all of those kind of things. Self-employed, so this one, you have a job and a salary. This one, you own a business, a small business. So you are what's known as a trading entity. Now, you also have to work out how much profit you've made, therefore how much tax you have to pay, and how that, when you have to pay it, how do you tell the revenue what you've got to pay, what you can claim, what you can't claim. There are a lot in tax, a lot of rules. Okay, tax is made up of masses and masses of rules. So the first thing we do when we do all of this is to teach you the rules. When you've learned the rules, you then need to apply them to the situation that you find yourself in. And then you will have to then calculate the tax accordingly and tell your client how much that they have to pay. Okay, so two income situations there. Now, some people have income from property and some people have income from banks and building societies. Dividend income, now that's taxed slightly different. There are different rules to that, and again, how does that all fit in together? If you've got all three of those, how does that affect you as an individual, and how do I work out the tax if I've got all three? That sort of thing. Now, again, that then brings us to this, a big computation or a big pro forma, where you have to put in all the entries, which we will look at later in the course. NIC for employed and self-employed people, exemptions and reliefs for deferring or minimizing your tax. There are things you can do. Now, those are all legal. Okay, so we've worked out our tax, brought all the information together, put it in the computation, and what we have to do now is to see if there are legal ways we can reduce that tax within the legal system. And you'll see about tax avoidance and evasion in that first chapter that I talked about, the UK tax system. You need to know the difference between the two. Okay. Now, that process of bringing all the information together in a computation, working out the tax and then working out what we can do to defer or minimize, is very much the same for companies. You'll notice, okay, so the scope, who's affected, how are they affected, total profits, that's all the various types of income that a company might have. So that could be trading income. It could be property income. It could be all sorts of various different types of income. It could also include chargeable gains. So that's gains on capital assets, which again, you'll find chapters of later in the course. We would then do, if you notice, again, very similar, a comprehensive computation. We bring all the various parts of the income together and we work out the tax. Now, if you look at the bottom one, exemptions and reliefs, to defer or minimise, same process. And again, it must be legal, within the law, within the rules. Now, with companies, they can have groups. So we need to learn what is a group, how is a group formed, and what the rules are. And when we apply those rules to a given situation, what the impact is on those companies within that group situation. So those two follow the same sort of pattern, but obviously with different rules, because that's what tax is all about, rules. Then chargeable gains, the scope of it. Now you notice here it's called chargeable gains. That's gains that are chargeable to tax. They're also called capital gains because they're on capital items, buildings, land, shares, chattels, all these words. You'll get to know them when you get to the chapters. They have their own set of rules. The principles of how we work out, compute, remember that? Compute is to work out the gains and the losses, because there are sometimes. Movable and immovable property. Do you remember the word I used earlier? Chattels. We'll come and you'll find out more about chattels. Shares, securities. How to work it out. How to work capital gains tax out. And then again, the same sentence you notice there. Exemptions and reliefs for deferring and minimising. There are lots of reliefs for capital gains tax, because capital gains tax is actually a very simple tax to work out. The rules are very simple. And because of that, and because it covers a wide scope of various different capital items, it's important that we know what these are. And there's a whole chapter, I think that maybe even 2 chapters, on reliefs and how they work. Inheritance tax, the last one. Now this is different than any other tax. You'll love it, I promise. The principles of how it works. What is a... There are lots of different words in this, new words. Transfers of value. Sometimes you actually pay inheritance tax, not when you die, but when you are alive, when you make a lifetime transfer. So we need to know what is a lifetime transfer, what isn't. What's chargeable, what's exempt. What happens when we die. Not from a physical point of view, you understand, but from a tax point of view. Again, exemptions and how that works, calculating all the tax. VAT, 3 main areas. Registration, when do we have to register? At what time do we have to register and how does it work? And also what happens when we want to deregister when the business finishes. So all those registration. How to work it out. You need to work out how to work out VAT. And some schemes. There are some special schemes that are available for people who are VAT registered. And we'll do those in detail. Then, the last section, 4.7, employability and technology skills. You couldn't say that then. Technology skills. This is a new area, and it's about being more employable once you've passed your ACCA. So can you use technology efficiently, okay, to access and manipulate information? In other words, put it on various I'm trying to think of the word, what the word is. It's gone out of my head. Forms. We'll use a form. Forms online. Okay, the word's gone out of my head. Please forgive me. Functions, technology, how we can use it in the workplace, navigate windows and computer screens to create and amend responses to exam requirements. Now, one of the most important things to do, this exam is an online computer exam. Please, 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 you're learning this on a piece of paper. A lot of the questions that you answer from the BPP manual, the revision kit, are on paper. You'll perhaps do a mock exam on a piece of paper, but you must practice doing these things online. The ACCA website has access to questions, mocks, exam papers, where you have to answer them online. You must practice them online before the exam, not just doing them on paper. Okay, although that's your first task. Okay, this is your exam. Okay, this is how everything's going to be tested. It's 3 hours, computer based, like I've just said. Okay, it will have computational, so that's your numbers, and discursive elements, that's discussion, that's words. So you may be given a scenario or a situation that a client has, because there'll be client-based questions. A client has a certain situation, what advice would you give them? Okay, so that's what is the rule, and apply it to their situation, and what the impact of that would be on them. Okay. Section A, 15 multiple choice questions. Okay, we'll come back to this later as we go through the exam and obviously the course. 2 questions each, marked by an exam computer. All right, so that's either right or it's wrong. Section B, 3 questions. So that's 3 different scenarios. And in each scenario, there are 5 questions. And they are objective test, as it calls them there, objective test, multiple choice questions. Now, some of these multiple choices are multiple choice, in other words, which ones do I choose? True, false, that sort of thing. Some of them you've got to do maths. You've got to do the maths and then write the answer in a little box, or type the answer in a little box. So there's 3 different situations, which means they could ask you 3 different taxes. It could be a VAT one, capital gains, and an income tax one. Then in section C, you've got 3 more questions. One of them is a 10-mark question. And then there are 2 15-mark questions, which is where you're given a situation and you have to normally prepare a large pro forma, bring all the information together. So we were doing income tax, and I said about the fact that you'd got to have income from employment, income from self-employment, income from property or a bank. And you have to bring all those together, take off the reliefs, work out the tax and tell the client when he's got to pay it and how much he's got to pay. That would be a 15-mark question. And as we go through the various chapters, the various topics, I'll bring this back in so that you can see that this is the sort of thing that you would probably turn up in a Section A question, or this is the sort of thing that's definitely going to be in a Section C question. And there are certain things in this paper that you will have to do. So I'll point those out as we're going along. Okay, and it says there, these 2, one of them will be income tax, one of them will be corporation tax. They've said that, that's what it is. So I'll let you know what kind of things it could be for income tax, what kind of things it could be for corporation tax. Okay, so again, just to reiterate there, your multiple choices, drag and drop, true and false. And again, check out your BPP revision kit for the styles. Get used to how the questions are worded and do them all before the exam. Practice, 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 practice. And obviously, I'll perhaps do a little session about revision techniques and how that works, so that you've got that. Section B, again, multiple choice. Just to reiterate, it's multiple choice, but it could be computational. show all your workings. Okay, so important that you show your workings, because it may be that you just got one figure wrong right at the very beginning, which means your answer's wrong. But in a tax exam, you don't get marks for getting the answer right. What the examiner's looking for is, do you understand the rule? Have you applied that rule? And do you understand the process of how to work out tax? Which means if you get one number wrong at the top, and you've used that number and worked it out correctly all the way down, that you may get 3 out of 5 instead of 0 out of 5. And if you don't show your markings and the examiner can't see, you get 0 out of 5 because the answer's wrong. And the examiner can't see how you got to that answer. If you show him the answer, he may be able to give you marks for the process that you've been through, even though your answer's wrong. So please, please show all your workings. And then the third one, section C, sort of things, adjusting profits, which we'll do in the self-employed chapter, capital allowances, self-employed, inheritance tax questions, capital gains. There will be pro formas and you will need to learn them. Okay, just at the end of this section now then, these are your tax tables. Every Finance Act has tax tables, and they are different from the year before. Every tax exam you take will have tax rates and allowances at the beginning. Never, you ready? Guess. Never guess. Okay? Always check. The examiner's given you this information. Use it. Okay? Always check. Okay? Never guess. Now, those rates, I would suggest you have them accessible, because as we go through the various chapters, we will be using these. We will refer to them, so know where they are. What I get my students to do when I'm in a classroom situation is I get them to print them off and have them in front of them, or the front of their files, front of their notes, so that they know exactly where they are. Okay, so that's your introductory. I'm looking forward to explaining all this information to you and sharing my knowledge and my expertise, and I look forward to taking you through this course. So shall we move on to the first chapter?